All right. So again, this is the update for RA2 reference Kubernetes architecture, the Anuket Orinoco release, and the usual Anuket Linux Foundation antitrust policies apply. So if you want any details on those, please refer to the link. So RA2 is now at its 10th release. Orinoco, the work was the release was started this January, and it's just finished the proofreading milestone. We're going to be releasing at the end of the month. RA2 is the reference architecture for Kubernetes-based telco cloud, and is divided in the following sections. In general, all of the requirements that we have are common between OpenStack-based and Kubernetes-based architectures and come from the reference model. We have, of course, a plain English high-level architecture chapter, and then the bulk of the specifications are in the chapters 4 onwards. The scope hasn't changed greatly in the last few releases, maybe including the Kubernetes cluster lifecycle management. That's still work in progress. But in general, we take care of the infrastructure. We specify what it takes to build a telco grade Kubernetes cluster, and its components, plugins, add-ons, extension, performance, and capabilities. Well, so without further ado, let me just go over what we've been doing in this release. So we've addressed 20 issues, and among these, the highlights include the update of the Kubernetes release. We've chosen Kubernetes 126 as it gives us enough, well, as it's future-proof enough for us to include it in the GSMA document, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and then still be valid by the time that will reach end of life. We've updated the Linux kernel requirements. Peter, maybe there's a slide on this later. We'll talk to you about the AF-XDP architecture, and then so RA2 has been approved as to be included as a GSMA specification document as part of the Open Infrastructure Task Force. So this is the first release where we will publish RA2 as an NG type GSMA document. So this is a big milestone for us. As part of this GSMA document release, we have restructured quite extensively the documentation itself by adding an external bibliography where we have all of our references in one place. We finalized the conversion from Markdown to restructured text, plus various updates and fixes that we've done. Before, maybe I'll think the next slide, Peter, is yours for XDP. Before I go over to that, is there any questions, comments, queries, concerns? All in all, it was a good work, big release. I think it's going to be one of the it's an important milestone for us. So yeah, Peter, would you like to then talk about AFXDP?
Yes.
Thank you.
So we had that discussion initially in the reference model, and then also a little bit in this architecture for Kubernetes. And during this release, added text and appropriate diagrams in the reference model, on the architecture, on the generic specification, and then also a little bit about how this is still not the most mature technology. And while we have it now in the platform coming, we still need to get likely new investment for the applications to take really advantage of that. And then in the RA2, in the architecture part, there is this diagram and there is text explaining how, I mean, what is this new socket type, and then there is also explanation of concepts of how does device plugin work and how does CNI fit into that and how are all these arrows connected together. So I'm not going to read the text now, but what came together overall is that there is explanation on how the applications can be written specifically for this socket type, or how the previous DPDK applications can be reworked, or also VPP applications, and how does it work bare metal or virtualized. And there is one part that I still plan to contribute. This is more specific on the what are the really the specifications on in terms of how to articulate that, and I plan to do that as I'm writing some related test cases, so that immediately these two things link together.
All right. Thank you for this. So, yeah, this is there any question on this for Peter? So this is an addition is going to be you're going to be seeing the changes in the high level reference architecture and specification chapters, and obviously in the next releases you will see further specifications on this. If there's no questions or comments, I will go over to the next one. So the plan for the next release, 11 Hyman. Well, the dates are like in the slide. So we're planning to start this summer and define the release and the scope by July and August. The work on the content should then occupy September and October, with proofreading taking place in November and releasing in December. Among the content updates that we're planning to have, and this is now open for discussion here in this forum, what should we do? What is more urgent? What has more priority? What's really needed, or what's missing from the community? Well, inherently with the fact that we're dealing with a Kubernetes specification, we are going to update the Kubernetes release upon which RA2 is based, updating it to either 127 or 128, depending on requirements, use cases, and life cycle in general. So we're going to have to choose a version that is obviously going to be live and really GA by the time of the release in December, but also something that is obviously going to make sense for the telco operators that are going to operate Kubernetes-based telco cloud, so that the adoption these requirements might is going to be more impactful on the various telcos and operators. In terms of features, we were planning to add there is a backlog of features that we've been meaning to implement for the past few releases, and some new ones. Things like NAT, things like infrastructure monitoring, things like edge deployments and PaaS services, more storage requirements and service mesh. Task Manager is a new, so cluster lifecycle management is new as part of the new scope. And then the synchronization with the func test, so conformance testing for Kubernetes clusters. Obviously, whenever there's new Kubernetes releases or new APIs or new functions to be tested, or new specifications that mandate new capabilities that have to be implemented, we intend to have a test for these. So obviously we are maintaining synchronization between RA2 and RC2, so the compliance testing based on func test. And obviously any fixes, any gaps that we have, any extra security requirements that we want to fulfill. And here it's open for discussion. So by anybody on the call. So are we missing anything? Does anybody think that something is critically important to include? What is something that you would like to see in future RA2 releases? What is something that the industry is missing in general, not only in Anuket, but in general, all the telcos? Is there any? Yeah.
One thing what we would need to decide, maybe that's not strictly related to RA2, but if you would like to get RC2 into the GSMA build, that would mean some work for us, which is, let's say, not under the hood of RA2.
Yeah, so exactly. That's also another thing, probably. That would mean including the RC2 documentation, obviously not software, in the structure of the RA2 document. Yes. I think so far what we've done is to at least try to have an initial GSMA release with the RA2 content. But yeah, in general, I would be open to including the RC2 content within that build. The RC2 project that currently doesn't have a product lead, so it's difficult to know exactly who will be and how the content will be maintained. So that's obviously doesn't help into adding it to the scope of the document if we don't know that content is going to be stale or not. But yeah, in general, I don't have a.
Yes, that's my very. Also, this is why I wanted to discuss if you would like to go for it or not.
Yeah, it would help if there was a PTL that can at least exactly follow and track the progress and the synchronization of RC2, obviously. Yeah, I think. Anything else from anybody?
So I have something for anything else, and I did mention this in the past, so maybe you'll remember about labeling. And we do have Anuket.io profile label that, according to specs, has a number of things to be implemented. And there is I mean, this is up to which it is specific today. But then beyond that, in terms of how some of the features that might also be in the non-network intensive cluster that are not discoverable in any other way but looking at the node itself when it's configured, after it's configured, which is obviously too late for scheduling. We need to first send something there. We would know that as we are configuring the node while building it, and we could have labeled it, but this is not agreed on how exactly to do that. So different vendors have different, well, some vendors have implementations that are, of course, vendor specific. The other option, the other thing is devices that can get allocated. They are free to be named in many different ways. And of course, there is the no consistency across implementations of that. And where I expect this will be further discussed, or at least the need will be raised, is in Project Silva, as they have to go and figure out how their installers will be calling those devices, for example, or if some of the other features will need to have a label. So maybe it's worthwhile having that discussion and see if some of the labels we could agree on and somehow specify them and somebody else then to use them, versus everybody just having their own label names and device names.
Yes, I agree. There was an initial attempt at so labeling profiles first of all, and then the other thing was profiles and the flavors were defined in the reference model to define different configurations or infrastructure capabilities or sizes or devices attached to the nodes or so yeah, but there's not yet a labeling schema for these things. So I agree that there is the risk that then any distribution or any implementation then decides how to label things differently.
Yeah, they don't have a choice. I mean, they have to.
Yeah, there has to be a label
somehow.
exactly. So yeah, I sort of I agree that the needs there might be the need for that thing. Let me add it in the minutes. Yes, certainly we can add an issue for that. Okay. Configuration is more labeling for node configurations, devices, something else.
Yeah, I would leave it like that. Yes. Configurations and devices. I think that's a good start. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? Let me see if we can. I mean, there's not too many of us right now, but a couple of queries or polls that we would like to run in the community was, apart from obviously this feature prioritization, what is most urgent, what needs to be done. Whether any of you here on the call are running already telco, Kubernetes, telco CAS platforms in either in labs or in production. what kind of Kubernetes releases are you running, or how often are you upgrading Kubernetes? So this is helping us choose relevant Kubernetes versions in the next releases. What network functions are you running on those clusters, and what challenges are you facing with these functions? And then obviously what features or technologies are we missing today? Is there anybody who here who would like to share their view, their answers to these questions? Let me see if I can show them. Yeah. Well, I can start. So Vodafone across many markets is running labs deployment, lab-based Kubernetes deployments in almost all the markets. I think we have between 20 and 30 markets. The production deployments are live in, I think, 3 or 4 of these. So we are actually live with Kubernetes cluster hosting live network functions with live traffic from users in 3 or 4 markets today. Vodafone is not very ahead in terms of Kubernetes releases, and I think the latest releases we're running today are 124. Most of the cases, maybe something more recent in labs, but not much else. And upgrade frequency in Vodafone is also limited to once every 2 or 3 Kubernetes releases, so once every 8-12 months. We're running in production mostly 5G core signaling, control and user plane functions. So yeah, 5G core. And as opposed to radio, as opposed to fixed access, as opposed to services, as opposed to things like radio, of course. There's a lot of challenges. I made a presentation for last KubeCon about what challenges we are facing in Vodafone today. So you can see that in the YouTube playlist of the last KubeCon in Amsterdam. But in general, there's number of challenges on multi-tenancy, or multi-homing and multi-tenancy. Separating network functions in different clusters has a big overhead for us. At the same time, providing multiple network interfaces also has drawbacks and complications, as we cannot leverage for example, network policies natively on secondary network interfaces, or routing gets more complicated.
Do you follow this network API work, what started by Google recently? They are working on the API specification, but the overall aim is to provide native support for multi-pod interfaces.
Yeah, exactly. The multi-network enhancement proposal is something we're looking at eagerly to treat, let's say, secondary network as first-class citizens. So yeah, that would be an excellent, I think, addition to the control plane, to the architecture. Other things include, of course, the fact that it is difficult, even in the context of Anuket, to have an industry-wide agreement on what are the essential components of Kubernetes clusters. Things like PaaS tooling, things like CNIs, CSIs. There is not really much consensus on what are the add-ons and what are the plugins and features that are mandatory, optional, or not required for a telco grade CAS. In Anuket, of course, we are trying to specify a set of minimum requirements for being, let's say, Anuket compliant. But I think there's still a way to go for full, let's say, industry alignment for Kubernetes vendors, for telco and network equipment providers and telco operators. Is there anybody else who would like to share their status view? What are you guys doing? Are you guys deploying stuff? Are you head up behind?
Maybe I can put some CNF vendor perspective if there is nobody else who would like to share their ideas, and practically our current biggest issue is that our customer base requires different things, and that's why we have lots of problems with integration and maintaining all releases of support of all releases of Kubernetes, while for other operators we have to support newer versions of Kubernetes, and that is not very effective. And as Ricard also mentioned, because we don't have a common set of features or plugins what are required from all the platforms, we have to build different platform adoption layers and maintain those, and that is not a very effective way of operating.
Thank you. Yes, I understand, obviously, the requirement for certifying a certain piece of software on different operators that are all very, not very homogeneous. That is something that is not very efficient. I think the adoption of RA2 as a reference set of requirements by telcos when selecting the Kubernetes platform may help steer and align many of these problems. So, for example, the fact that in Anuket RA2 we mandate the use of a certain API for multiplexers means that there should be at least homogeneity in implementing multiplexing in Kubernetes. The fact that we have a certain version of Kubernetes as a reference should steer CaaS vendors or Kubernetes vendors and telcos that implement it into adopting those specific Kubernetes releases. So if anybody has any suggestions about what parts of Kubernetes, what parts of the infrastructure should be more homogeneous, and what are the pain points in deploying Kubernetes cloud or applications across different Kubernetes clouds, just let us know or join us. Okay, let me just go to the last slide, and you can join us in the RA2 project. Everybody's welcome. We're trying to accelerate the adoption of Kubernetes-based telco cloud. This project is open for contribution from any background. We're meeting weekly, but you can also check out our mailing list, our wiki with our minutes of our meetings And finally, of course, the output of our work, which is our documentation, and which is available on Read Docs for every release and on GitHub if you're interested in seeing what we're working on at this very moment. So thank you. Is there, before we close, is there any further comments, questions, queries, remarks?
Yes, Ricardo, not related to the presentation, but kind of make sure that you rename the presentation and add it to the wiki page when you get a chance. And if anyone is on the call who have not registered, please do so. We use that data. So please register. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think I've uploaded the slides already. I'll just PDF them and rename them. Upload this recording. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking part, and see you in the other sessions of the NTF forum.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for having your day.
Mamoli.